Hello, meeting.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the London Borough of Newham's Crime and Antisocial Behaviour Scrutiny Commission. Can everybody present hear me? Just raise your hand, please. Just let me know. Fantastic. Thank you very much. This evening's meeting will be held virtually via Zoom. The council has decided that while we are in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic, public meetings will be held virtually for the meantime to keep councillors, officers, and members of the public as safe as possible. Members of the public will be able to view this meeting via Newham's YouTube page. For this meeting, we will be aided by Roger Raymond. He will assist councillors and officers with technology. May I ask members to note that they must raise their hand in order to indicate that they wish to speak. I also want to remind members that if a vote is taken at any time, it will be by way of raising your hand like so, in order that we can capture this on the screen. This meeting of the London Borough of Newham's Crime and Antisocial Behaviour Scrutiny Commission is now called to order. Agenda item number 2, apologies for absence. Does any member have any apologies for absence or any officer?
No, Chair.
Okay. Anybody have any apologies for absence before I move on?
No, Chair.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. Agenda item number 3, declarations of interest. Are there any members wishing to make any declarations of interest at this moment?
No, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on. Agenda item number 4, minutes. The next item is the minutes of the meetings held on the 25th of February 2020 and the 12th of March 2020. Does any member have any amendments that they wish to move?
No, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. I move as a correct record the minutes of the last 2 meetings of the Commission held on the 25th of February 2020 and the 12th of March 2020. Do I have a seconder, please?
I'll second, Chair. Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. Thank you, Councillor Garfield as well. Okay, are the minutes agreed? Agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Moving on to item number 5, COVID-19 enforcement update. This is one of our substantive items. We will now hear from Councillor James Beckles, the Cabinet Member for Crime and Community Safety, Alva Bailey, the Assistant Director of Community Safety, and Detective Superintendent Paul Whiteman, North East Basic Command Unit. So thank you very much for coming along, witnesses. If we start in that order, I'll give you 5 minutes to introduce yourself and also to give your opening remarks. Councillor Beckles.
Thank you, Scrutiny. I'm Councillor James Beckles, Cabinet Member for Crime and Community Safety. As we've seen, COVID has taken its toll in Newham. Since lockdown, we have been engaged with the police in a supporting manner. We do not have any enforcement powers, as per se the police do. As a local authority, we have been utilising our community safety staff and team to inspect, whether it's through regulatory services or to monitor in public spaces. We have 82 parks and open spaces, and sending our community safety officers there in which to provide visibility and also to provide 3 of the 4 E's. We do not enforce, but what we do, we provide information, we engage, and we explain the regulations as they are now to our residents. As of October 14th, there's been amendments to the COVID regulations. The rule of 6 still applies. However, there will be changes to those, as in if you are outside a bubble, a support bubble, or if you are outside of a household which has 6 people or less, then you cannot then you cannot go to another person's home, and you cannot engage in a gathering in public or indoors. So then, therefore, it will be illegal. In terms of our on-street presence, we have our EPT team who will again be supporting the police and supporting our officers in case they need it. We are also preparing our measures so that we can continue to engage residents. We are also updating our messages online and with council facilities in which to encourage people to take the best possible actions and avoid public spaces and also avoid unnecessary gatherings. And I'll end there.
Thank you very much, Councillor Beckles. I'm going to leave questions until all three of you have spoken, if that's okay. And then I think it'd be good if we could just, go into the questions then. Alva Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. Alva Bailey, Assistant Director for Community Safety. Just to add that in relation to the enforcement, we've now, with London now having been moved into tier two, which means that there are further restrictions on gatherings and some restrictions on some licensed premises. We've increased our visibility of council officers on the street. Starting just this weekend past on Saturday, we've started to redirect some of our enforcement officers to provide a bit more of a, not totally static, but a slower, a smaller area rather, in areas of high footfall to again engage, encourage, and explain the regulations and the different rules to members. As Councillor Becker says, we have no powers to enforce in public space, but we work closely with the police to ensure that officers can intervene where there's a need to enforce. We also work closely with our trading standards colleagues in the council. So it's a joint enforcement approach in that respect, where law enforcement officers come across businesses that are not observing the rules. We advise them and encourage them, but if they insist, then we'll inform our enforcement colleagues so that they may increase the warning, or at least take it up to a next threshold with a verbal or written warning as required. But at the moment, the emphasis is to encourage people as much as possible to observe the regulations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alva. Next up, Detective Superintendent Paul Whiteman.
Good evening, Chair. Paul Whiteman, DSU for North East BCU. I'll just give a little bit of context and go through some figures of what enforcement we've done. Since the start of the outbreak, I've had fortnightly calls with Alva and his colleague from Waltham Forest in relation to the backdrop to how COVID is affecting both boroughs, and I found that very useful, and it's been useful in making sure that we've got a joint approach to how we deal with COVID. Largely, as you've heard already, the 4 E's is how we're setting out our stall. So the engage, explain, encourage, but also the enforcement. And I've got some figures which I've provided to the panel already, but I'll just go through them briefly. So this is COVID Act 2020 regulations. So these are the dates from the 25th of March until the 8th of October. So in the Newham borough, we've charged 17 people. 2 people have been released under investigation. 20 people have been authorised for a charge. That may be a written charge or a postal charge. 32 fixed penalty notices. 4 community resolutions. And then there have been 25 occasions where we've taken no further action after arrest. So, and what I'd say is that on occasions people get brought in for to the police station for one offence, but also committing COVID regulation breaches. The classic example being a drunken disorderly or something of that nature. So that tends to explain our enforcement activities. As Mr. Bailey said before, licensing and sharing information absolutely key to our approach. So we make sure that where we've got information about licensing breaches, certainly in the early days of the lockdown being released, there were a number of reports of certain licensed premises looking to take advantage of trading again, with little social distancing being evidenced. We were certainly engaging and looking to explain to the licensees who, on the whole, have worked with us very well on the licensed premises front. Also, a fair bit of work over the summer went into unlicensed music events. These were held in various locations, and we shared information with council colleagues looking to use a full range of powers there. And we found that the £10,000 fine, that the threat of that paid to most of these, and also looking at seizing alcohol, which was there to be sold on. So moving into the next stage of the COVID pandemic, we'll still stay with our 4Es approach, and continue with liaising with council colleagues. We run an operation with our Safer Neighbourhoods colleagues over the summertime to look for particularly bad hotspots, or in relation to public complaints where social distancing or other breaches were reported. Examples of this were prior to the end of the lockdown, car washes opening early, and various other breaches which we dealt with, and there were dedicated staff on to actually deal with these offences. That's the end of my evidence.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and three of you, really appreciate that. I'm going to move to the committee now. Does anybody have any questions for any three of our witnesses? Just raise your hand. Councillor Garfield, Councillor Masters, I see you. Anybody else I can put you in the list? Okay, Councillor Garfield.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for that briefing, the three of you. I just wanted to know, do we have any figures on how many fines have been issued in the borough for violations of the Rule of Six?
If I could take that one, Chair, I've got the data in front of me. It doesn't break down that Rule of Six, which I think is because that has only recently come in. So I'm guessing here that the 32, that number I've given is 32, are fixed penalty notices for, I would suggest mask wearing, public transport, that sort of thing. I don't know is the answer to that Rule of Six.
Can I ask then that you find out, if you can, after the meeting, and just send it to us in an email? Is that okay?
Yeah, I'll do my best. I think we should have a separate code for that, but I just don't know what it is, so I'll do my best on that. Thank
you very much. Councillor Garfield, do you have another question?
I do. Do you want me to ask it now or after Councillor Masters?
If it's a supplementary to your first one, then yes. If it's a
separate
brand
question.
New, okay, I'll let Councillor Masters jump in. Councillor Masters.
Of course.
Okay, looking at the numbers of enforcement measures, it seems quite low as a proportion of, or a reflection of the large population involved. Would you see that as part of a sort of light touch approach and a positive? Or is this about challenges in terms of your resources to actually enforce?
I'd see it as a light touch, but it is an additional duty for us to carry out. So we're following the 4Es, which is the government approach, which they've asked us to follow. That engage, explain, encourage, the key bit of it, and then leaving that enforcement to the last part. But there is a staffing issue around this is an extra piece of work that we're doing, and also we want to bring the public with us on this and actually explain what's going on. So there's a balance there, I'd say.
Thank you, Councillor Masters. Do you have a supplementary?
Yeah, I'm just interested from Alva's point of view in terms of our enforcement team, whether he would echo that, and in terms of both the police and enforcement, how much additional resource do they feel they might need to compensate for these additional duties?
Okay. As we said, for the council enforcement officers, we have no powers under these regulations to do any of the enforcement, so we don't enforce. And but absolutely, we're working closely with the police and applying the same approach. There is no intention to disproportionately call the police on people when an alternative of explaining and encouraging works. If that doesn't work, then of course we will seek to call the police if we think it's necessary. Equally, we have to think of the police resources. So if we're talking about, for example, a group of 7 people standing, and we've asked them to socially distance and they refuse to, we have to weigh up the reasonableness, I suppose, of asking the police to come to that kind of situation. But of course, there might be, and there have been in the past, some situations where we've tried to intervene, and it's clear that people won't socially distance and they won't heed our recommendations, and we have informed the police and have sought support from the police to break up that gathering. Usually it's to do with bigger gatherings. So broadly, we are supporting that approach, and generally it's working. Certainly, especially this second time round when the restrictions have been in place, we've seen people much more compliant and much more responsive to council officers asking them to socially distance. For example, when they're queuing for banks and other facilities on some of our high streets, when they're in shops. Sometimes we just need to remind people, and they generally agree. So we generally don't have that problem.
Councillor Melzer, can you mute yourself? Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. Sorry, Alva, can you please continue? Sorry about that.
Yes, just to say, we generally don't have a big problem in trying to enforce the regulations. And then in terms of capacity going forward, we're currently asking our officers to support it using a bit of overtime. And that means some officers coming in on their rest days and giving some additional hours just to make sure we have some additional capacity in some of the high footfall areas, such as Meridian Square and some of the parts in the borough. But the council is currently going through a process to seek some additional officers, which we intend to train up so that we can have even greater presence and higher visibility on some of our hotspots, or high footfall areas is probably a better term to use than hotspots.
Thank you very much, Alva. Quick question from me. How many officers do you have at the moment that are doing that sort of work that you were speaking about, encouraging people, explaining to people and engaging with the public that they should socially distance, wear masks, etc., in those high footfall areas?
Sorry, I have to remember to unmute myself. Today we have on average 6 officers per shift. We have 2 shifts a day, from 9 in the morning till 9:30 at night, and so one shift will start at 9, finish sometime in the afternoon, late afternoon. The other shift starts around 11:30 to 9 p.m. To 9:30 p.m. And so on average we'll have 12 officers throughout the day in those areas. With the additional overtime and officers coming in on their rest days, we're boosting that as we go through. So on average, in any hotspot, we will have at least 2 officers, high visibility, encouraging that. So once we get some additional people, then we expect those numbers to grow as well, because as I said, there are efforts now to recruit some additional people to support that process.
Sure. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that. So just so I get it right, you said there were 2 shifts and there were 6 on each shift. So at any one time, we've got 6 officers patrolling the borough. or these hotspots. Now, the one thing I would say is I probably haven't got to all parts of Newham just yet, but I've got to quite a few. And as Councillor Masters mentioned earlier on, we are quite a sizable population. It does seem to me that 6 officers compared to 350,000 residents is some feat. And of course, whilst all those residents won't be in those high footfall areas at all times, of course not, but it does seem like a very, very small number. I mean, has it always been that way, or is this something we've gone down to? Have we gone up to 6? Have we gone down to 6 in the last year? Can you just give us a bit of background as to how we got to the number 6, please? Thank you.
Okay. Yes, the number 6 is about the officers we're using specifically for these COVID marshalling, if you like. We have additional officers who are our normal enforcement officers, and that number is slightly greater. Still not very many more, but slightly greater. The numbers I'm speaking about here are the numbers that we are committing to this support, specifically to the COVID marshalling. So we have officers throughout the day doing this, but doing this as part of their normal enforcement work, if you like. So they're still patrolling across the borough, but focusing on our high street. These additional officers are, as I said, a bit more static in the high footfall areas. So they're not roving the borough as normal enforcement officers do. So they'll be going to places like Meridian Square, West Ham Lane, the Broadway, and I've got a long list of high street and high footfall areas where they're patrolling. So that's the number. We expect to increase that number, I would say, within a week or so. You may well be aware that the government has afforded boroughs some additional funding to support COVID marshals and work around that. So we're using some of that funding to secure some additional staff over the next few months to support this effort.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that answer. Does any councillor have any questions? Okay, I'm going to go back.
If I could, Chair, if I could just come in just to supplement that, if I may.
Of course, absolutely.
The move to tier 2, previously in the first wave, we had dedicated officers to deal with COVID calls, be they sudden death calls or breaches. As the numbers dropped off, then we didn't need so many, but the move to tier 2 will see dedicated officers again who are there to do COVID enforcement work. So supplementing what Alva's said, we have got officers who are dedicated to that task. Now, that doesn't mean that if there's a call for service and all the rest of them are busy, then they won't go. Then clearly they will, because they're police officers at the start of the day. But the intention is to keep them available to deal with any COVID issues.
Thank you very much for that. The only question I would ask you is roughly how many, because obviously it does sound good, and I'm glad that's an intention, because it's something that I would hope that the borough commander would be looking at and the senior leadership team would be looking at. But I have to drill down into this and ask roughly how many are you talking about, because it would need to be quite a number. Thank you. Yeah,
it's not a huge number because we're prioritising violence and other offences, but it's one car per borough, so that could be 2 officers per shift. That's the level, but the caveat on that is that if things are going on that demand a police response, then they're not totally ring fenced into just COVID. We can't have that, but it's an extra 2, and it's those people that we can use for those COVID issues.
Sure. Thank you very much, and I really appreciate the frankness of your answer. Councillor Garfield and then Councillor Masters. Councillor Garfield.
Thank you, Chair. This might not be a question that Detective Superintendent Whiteman can answer, but definitely one for potentially Councillor Beckles to take away. I wanted to know whether we've increased our parking enforcement across the borough as a result of the change in traffic orders and the measures to enable social distancing. A lot of residents have been in touch with regard to what they perceive as being our lack of enforcement with regards to parking or driving offences, and I think that has had a knock-on effect on people's ability to effectively social distance. So I wanted to know if that was something we're addressing as part of our COVID targeting for enforcement.
just before anybody answers that, can I just ask Councillor Garfield just to clarify that? Because I normally do get things, but I fear I may have misinterpreted that. Are you saying that residents are complaining at the lack of parking tickets being issued to drivers? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I've been made aware of quite a few people who have been violating recently brought in enforcement through ETOs to enable social distancing.
Okay. All right, thank you. Councillor Beckles.
Parking is slightly outside of my area, I'm afraid. Parking enforcement.
So is there potential? Is there it's a good answer?
Yes,
I had a feeling that might be the answer, so I do have a follow-up, Chair. Is there potentially something to be done by bringing together parking enforcement with wider enforcement just for the COVID period? Because this is something that is affecting our ability as a local authority to tackle coronavirus. If people can't social distance on the pavement, especially on pedestrian thoroughfares where a lot of offenders are parking on pavement at the moment, I think there is potentially room, if you agree, Councillor Beckles, for the two to be brought together for the purpose of this task force for the duration of COVID.
I think that's something I'd have to go away and discuss with my cabinet colleague, James Asser, and also with the corporate director, whether that's probably the best way of utilizing all of our resources.
Final one, I promise, Chair. In terms of it being an effective way to utilize resources, of course, if we as a council are able to better and more effectively enforce parking and driving regulations, it's an income gen for the authority. And if that's something that's brought into the task force, it potentially could be revenue positive.
Yes, it could be, but again, it's outside my area, so I'm not too familiar with the specifics of it. I do know it's income generating, but again, I'd have to discuss with my cabinet colleague.
Thank you, Councillor Beckles.
Thank you very much. Roger, can I please ask that you mute any councillors that are not speaking, because I can hear like background interference noises. I'm sure my colleagues can as well. Yeah, is that done? Thank you very much. It's just that it's
No
very
problem.
very
Keep an eye on it. Thank you.
Please do. Thank you very much. And can I also ask, please, that action that Councillor Garfield just asked for, essentially about the two services joining up, that we follow that up. So if we could ask for a response from Councillor Beckles via email, and potentially Councillor Asser, as it straddles his area as well, that would be good to be brought back to the committee so that we can have a look at that. Thank you very much. Councillor Masters.
I just wanted to sort of go back over the numbers on this on two levels. Firstly, to understand as a proportion of the enforcement workforce, what proportion these 6 people are. And then secondly, looking at the figures in slide 8, I'm just wondering, you know, obviously you've got this sort of huge leap up in April, and then, you know, the sudden peak in August, and then coming down again in September. How much does that kind of pattern and those numbers, how much of that is the pandemic and how much of that is just normal seasonal figures for noise and ASB?
Yes, you'll see the figures have almost doubled in some cases from March. And the line of views, which I'm almost sure is correct, is there are more people at home to make noise, and there are also more people at home to witness noise, and therefore it's quite reasonable to expect tolerance levels to go down, but also for the reports to increase when people are stuck at home for a long time. Looking into those, I think it's equally important to look more into the nature of the noise. And I've been spending a lot of time with the team trying to make sure that we understand what noise is, and we don't just refer to everything as noise. And the fact that it's called noise is the overriding issue. So a lot of this noise is normal household domestic noise. A lot of it is about children running in corridors, slamming doors. A lot of it is television, but occasionally we do have some that is about garden parties, particularly in the summer, earlier in the summer months, around about April, May, June time. A lot of that are related to garden parties. And so in those cases where we can, we followed up with warning letters and different measures. And in some cases, of course, we encourage people to report these issues to the police, because we have, as I said, no enforcement powers for the COVID regulations. So the added work to the team really has been around trying to filter the noise, if you like, for want of a better term, in terms of trying to understand precisely the nature of the noise and dealing with the frustration from some of our residents who just expect a response because they are disturbed by the noise. But of course, we can't. We can't enforce against household noise. It doesn't reach a category of statutory noise, and it doesn't. It's not really antisocial behaviour in the wider scheme of things, or as the legislation intended. So, yes. So the noise have increased significantly, but as I said, more people at home to make it, more people at home to witness it.
Thank you. Just very quickly, Councillor Masters. I'm not sure, maybe I missed it. Councillor Masters asked you a question at the start about what proportion that 6 makes up of the overall enforcement workforce, and I don't remember hearing an answer to that.
No.
I'm not sure, maybe I missed it, but just in case I did, could you just go over that, please, Alva? Thank you.
Yes, sure. Sorry, I missed that as well. The overall number of officers at the moment, in terms of enforcement officers, is around 36 in total. I need to be precise. It could be two or two either way on that, but it's around 36. But of course, we're operating 2 shifts per day, and in that, working a shift pattern 7 days a week. We have to allow for rest time. So at any given time on any shift, you'll have maximum 8 people per shift as a maximum. So when the shifts overlaps throughout the day, the peak could be 16 people. So on a typical day, with each shift having a peak of say 8 officers per shift, we'll have 16 people in the borough. These officers are usually your mobile officers patrolling the full length of the borough, but we also have 7 antisocial behaviour officers who are separate from the enforcement officers. Albeit the antisocial behaviour officers are not out patrolling the streets. They are dealing with casework and following up antisocial behaviour complaints and so forth. So in terms of enforcement officers, at any given time, we could have 16. It's not always that number, of course. We have sick, we have a lot of people shielding recently due to COVID and so forth. But during our peak time, all being well, we could have a maximum of 16 people.
So we're having over a third of our.
Just quickly, Councillor Masters, sorry. Thank you very much for the answer, Alva. Councillor Masters, do you have a supplementary?
I just wanted to sort of clarify that what Alva is actually saying is over a third of our enforcement force is taken up with COVID duties. So we have lost that third of our enforcement force to COVID duties. I just wanted him to be clear about the figures here.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity, because I think it's worth clarifying. So the officers do their normal work at the moment. COVID has become a part of the normal work. The additionality that we are doing in terms of that static presence, or that more static presence, semi-static presence, is when officers do overtime. So we have a separate overtime shift, if you like. And so the additional hours, at the end of the day, we've asked some officers volunteer 2 hours of their time. Of course, they get paid, but we're asking them to give their time. We're not imposing this, to give their time 2 hours, and also on their rest days. Some officers choose to come in on their rest days. So of that contingent, we have that extra additional 6 people that we use in these high footfall locations. But your normal shift officers are there, but they're also now doing COVID, as well as their normal littering offences, fly tipping, ASB responses, and so forth. So that work continues. It's just that COVID has become part of that as well.
Thank you very much. Councillor Garfield, I'm going to come to you, but I must say, I am a bit worried that our whole COVID response hinges upon the good, the good grace of our officers to do some overtime or to come in on their rest days. I just think, to be honest with you, as a local authority, I think people would expect a little bit more from us in terms of having that capacity to be able to deal with this, because it is a big thing and it has been going on for like 7 to 8 months now. And so I just think people will be a bit surprised that that's the limits of what we've managed to achieve thus far. Councillor Garfield, and then I think it's Councillor Belgique Aguana who had their hand up. Thank you, Councillor Garfield.
I didn't actually have a question in mind, Chair, but on the back of the point you've just made,
sure.
I have invented a question, if that's okay, given the floor. Again, this may be something that's more of an action point for Roger to take away, other than something that can be answered here today. But I would wonder whether the council has done some meaningful work on the possibility of redeployment of staff for the next year or so, given that there are a number of council services that will not be in ordinary operation, as we'd expect due to social distancing measures and the facilities that we've had to close. And that could be used to bolster enforcement, at least with the softer enforcement that we have to do with regards to mask, social distancing, business adherence to those rules of 6, etc., especially while we're in tier 2. That potentially is something that officers might want to explore. I think that would be useful for us as a report to give as well to full council.
Thank you, Councillor Garfield. Alva or Councillor Beckles, do you have anything you want to say to that? I think it's quite a good idea.
I can say, if you don't mind, Councillor Beckles, just to say that, yes, the council is actively pursuing this at the moment. And as I said earlier on, we expect within a week or so to have some additional redeployees from other parts of the council, other parts of services that might not be running. So active Newham, for example, and some other parts of the council to be a part of this. So that work is well underway, and I expect, I agree, a whole training package for those officers today, waiting for them to be supplied to my service so that we can train them up and deploy them in the hotspot areas. But we're also working with NHS colleagues or public health colleagues. So I know, for example, that we were just discussing today a prime location in Stratford, to have the NHS mobile facility parked up. I think it's going to be Thursday this week, which is a Luton van with, lots of information and advice. We have some people there with multiple languages, being able to give advice to our residents. So there's a lot of work afoot to make sure that happens, and we have enough officers out there on the front line.
Thank you very much, Alva, for that. Councillor,
could I just, do you mind if I just come in and I'd say that given the numbers in our crime hotspots, our cops are out and they are engaging with people, and COVID is on their mind as well. So our response teams and our cops out doing various crime initiatives will have COVID in amongst what they're doing as well, to give advice and to enforce if necessary those people that aren't taking the advice. So we're part of that as well, and certainly those high footfall areas that Stratford, East Ham, some of those areas where we've got other crime operations going on. COVID is part of that as well. So if we see people that are obviously not following the advice, not taking the advice on board, then we will enforce if we need to.
Thank you very much, Councillor Guana.
For the information numbers of the team, sounds is only few. I think it's we have a large population. I don't think so. We have a large numbers for the enforcement team. When you say we will have additional, how many do you think we will have?
Thank you very much, Councillor Guana. Alva?
Yes, there is a recruitment drive going on. To some extent, the government announced the additional information, additional funding very late. I'm sure you all will appreciate that local authorities are already very stretched coming out of the first round of lockdown and the additional expenses. So most local authorities in London and across the country were waiting for this additional money. Newham got just under £250,000 to support this cause. Of course, all of that money won't be used to employ people, and a lot of the people will be redeployees, but there's a lot of work on the way to recruit as many people as we can. And I know there are colleagues at the moment working hard on that, and I'm in touch with them every day. So the intention is to get as many people as we can. We have a lot of high street areas and high footfall areas, so we want to have as many people out there giving advice, engaging people, engaging businesses. We're still trying to get businesses to download, to put up the QR code. We're still trying to encourage residents to download the app and so forth. So there's a lot of work and communication around this that we're trying to get out there. So I can't give you a number, but the intention is to get as many people as possible.
Okay, as a follow-up to Councillor Guana's question, can I ask Roger that maybe in a month's time, we just ask for an update as to how many people additionally have been recruited so that we can keep a track on it as a committee, so that we can just have it as something that we keep an eye on it. Is that okay, Roger? Yeah?
Thank you, Chair. No problem, noted it.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Thanks. I'll mute myself. Does any other councillor have any questions? No? Councillor Masters? No. I have a question then, if nobody else does, and it was regarding the noise. Now, as a local councillor, throughout the lockdown, I was getting a lot of emails from residents complaining about noise and feeling as though nothing was really being done. And I kept pushing and pushing and pushing to try and find out what was being done, not just for my residents, but for all residents. One of the things that I found out was that our noise team operates at a certain hour, between this hour and that hour. Can you give me some of the background rationale to why we've decided to operate at the hours that we do, please? Thank you, Albert.
A number of reasons. One of the key ones is we used to operate an out of hours noise team, and that worked. That team worked not every day of the week. I think it worked from Wednesdays to Sundays. We also at that time used to have additional police officers around, and they would ensure that our officers are safe. They would support our officers where required, and quite often would protect our officers. So one of the factors why we're no longer operating that nighttime service is we no longer have the nighttime enforcement partnership team to support officers to gain entry, to knock on people's doors who are making noise. And during the night, council officers are particularly vulnerable in those cases. Another reason, of course, is a reduction in funding for the service overall. And ultimately, there is a change in approach to how we address issues such as noise. As I indicated in one of my earlier answers, the previous approach to noise was call the council if you hear noise, and we'll have an officer available. Having looked at all the information around that, a lot of that noise, as I said, was domestic noise. A lot of it, when officers got to the complainant's address, they were told, oh, it's stopped now, we don't need you anymore. Or even when we called in advance of visiting, we were told, oh, it's all gone. So what we had is a culture of people calling just to report noise, and we had a service that would try and respond. So it was inefficient and very often ineffective. So a waste of resources in many respects. What we're trying to do now is to support a better understanding of noise, encourage residents to report noise as they already do. We will be, as I said, filtering that as much as we can to make sure we understand what constitutes antisocial behavior. All complaints will still be investigated once it reaches that threshold of persistence, impact, and intent. And people get the same support. They just won't have an urgent response team. So the noise team now, or the noise response operates just with the rest of the service from 9 in the morning till 9:30 at night. And from November, that will extend to 11 p.m. when in line with the police team.
Thank you very much. I've got a supplementary. Two things. The first thing is, I am a bit baffled. You mentioned persistent. Now, obviously, persistent noise nuisance is something that really can drive people around the bend. I totally get that. But so can an impromptu party as well. Persistence is not the key to everything, I would argue, on this case. And I just wonder where, on two fronts, we are. I understand what you're saying about officers turning up and potentially, the party having finished or people having left. Completely get that, and that's something that you would think could happen potentially. However, the mere fact that we don't turn up at all, it leaves those residents who are actually going through hell and high water on their own. And that's the thing that I think you've kind of missed out of what you've just said is, yes, I agree with you. There would be an element of residents who, use the service, probably not in the right way, if we want to put it that way. But there will be an element, maybe a small element, but an element nonetheless of residents who use the service because at 3 in the morning, they've got somebody who is being unreasonable and playing music night after night, or even if it's just for one night. But the fact of the matter is it exists. And the second point that was a question, kind of more of a statement. But the second point is when we look at other councils, not just across London, but across the country, is this now best practice that we just don't have a noise team? Because if that's the case, then I think that gives people free rein to kind of do as they want. And the second part of my question actually goes to the police, Detective Superintendent Paul Whiteman. Is it actually the police's responsibility to come along and deal with noise nuisance, or is it the council's responsibility? Because from what I'm understanding, it's not actually the council's responsibility. So can somebody clear that up for me? Thank you.
Yeah, I can start. The prosecution under environmental act for noise isn't one that the police deal with, and that is what I think Albert Bailey's referring to in the persistence. The difficulty, if I turn my stereo on at 3 a.m. And upset everyone, then that isn't persistent if it never happens again, and it's difficult then to get a prosecution. Any environmental health, they need to measure the output of the whatever device it is, etc. Yes, we fill in if there's a commotion, if there's beginning to be a public order situation, then the police officers will come and they will try and address that, and also we fill in terms of longer term problem solving, because our safer neighbourhoods teams look to try and solve problems. So if it is that party that keeps going on, well, there may be other routes that the police have got, such as COVID regulations, such as taking alcohol off of young people who shouldn't have it, etc. So there are different routes that we'll take to try and support the council, knowing that Environmental Protection Act is difficult to get to an enforcement stage, and actually bring someone to court for a noise issue is not an easy task.
Thank you very much, and I really do appreciate your contribution. There's still a couple of things that I need Alva to clear up. I think what you've just said there, essentially, is you've clarified for me, and I just want to make sure that I'm on the correct page here, that ultimately it is up to the council to deal with these matters. And yes, the police can fill in if you can, but ultimately it's up to the council to deal with noise issues. That's correct, isn't it?
Yes, the council, as Mr. Whiteman said, the council deals with statutory noise, and so we can issue noise abatement notices and orders if there's statutory noise. Of course, to determine whether it's statutory noise, it needs to be witnessed and measured, and it has to go over a certain decibel and so forth. These statutory noise nuisance are not as often as one might think. Quite often, of course, there is noise that's inconvenient and disruptive, but it doesn't reach us the level that would constitute statutory nuisance. And sometimes a well-trained officer can determine that without a measuring device. but as I said, most of the reports that the service used to receive did not reach statutory levels and were not persistent. There were occasional noise that were annoying, and people would just call immediately to say, well, my neighbor's TV is too loud, for example, and television noise is almost the highest one. But of course, people only watch television for so long, and it's not always the same night after night. We encourage people as much as possible to engage their neighbors about some of these concerns, because this is about sort of residents engaging and having relationships with their neighbors and explaining problems. Sometimes the reason behind the noise could be hearing impairment, so there are a number of reasons why these things happen, and enforcement is not always the route out of dealing with these problems. So the approach going forward is a problem-solving approach, as Mr. Whiteman indicated there, where we absolutely work with neighbors and perpetrators, if you like, to understand the reasons for the noise, to warn people and advise them to cease the noise, if you like, and to the point of other councils, very few councils, and certainly very few in London, have a nighttime noise service like we have. The council is not I keep saying a blue light service. We don't have powers to do much apart from warn someone to turn the noise down. And if they refuse to, we would have to call the police in any case if it's not statutory nuisance. So we are the approach we're using now is one of engagement and encouragement in that space as well. Of course, we are issuing warnings and notices, and ultimately we will if it's persistent, we will put a noise recording equipment in the complainant's home, for example, so they can measure the noise. And if it reaches the level where it is statutory nuisance, we will go through the legal avenues we have for that. But having a very costly noise response service that only worked in any case part of the week. It wasn't right throughout the week. It worked from Wednesday night to Sunday. It was not efficient, and was not good value for money in terms of the cost to the council and what they actually dealt with.
Thank you very much, Councillor Masters.
This has really raised an issue for me. I know we don't talk about individual cases we're dealing about in our ward, and I'm not going to do that. But what advice can we give our residents where they're in a situation where they're dealing with ASB involving noise, involving people dealing drugs, behaving in an antisocial fashion within a block, and the police, because of their lack of resources and the pressure on them, difficult to get hold of, and then maybe don't come out. The council, because of lack of resources, can't attend. I mean, there has to be a solution. I mean, if we don't have the resources to address this, what resources can we give to empower residents to record these experiences and get action? Because I've been told that merely reporting to a councillor and the councillor recording this, even if this is a pattern of behaviour being reported by several independent households over a period of years, apparently if they report to a councillor, that's hearsay in terms of their accounts. So I'm just wondering what we can do to bridge this gap, which is significant, and to deal with this sort of terminal issue of ASB in our communities, particularly in our blocks.
Could I pick that one up,
Yes, please,
Paul Whiteman? Drugs enforcement, that's down to us, and I'd encourage anyone who's got information about drug taking, drug use, you name it, any drug stuff, which will bring with it ASB and misery for the residents, frankly, to get that reported either to their local officers who can deal with it or via Crime Stoppers anonymously. And we do drugs warrants and raids every week. I'm quite happy to send officers to keep doing that because those, law-abiding citizens, that they live in those blocks, and it's just pure misery. And we've had recent feedback. Some of the jobs we've done around some of our open spaces and the local in flats, etc. Once we've cleared the problem up, people do come up and say, "Yeah, it's a pleasure to be back here now." And so I'd say get the information in by whatever route, and if councillors are getting that information, please forward it on. Our local teams, certainly Newham and Waltham Forest, are some of the most active across the Met in terms of getting drugs warrants and stop and search, etc. for those, in response to the local community saying we've had enough. These are criminal offences taking place. We want action, and we will definitely do what the community want us to do there.
I'm really pleased you said this, but I just have to be honest and say that's not what we hear from our safe neighbourhood teams on the ground. And this is a case I've been dealing with for 3 years. So, it just feels something's gone terribly wrong.
Well, if you want to give me the details, I could certainly bring it up with that team and see what we can do. There's no difficulty with that. Forward it to Roger, and I'll see what enforcement we can look at. If we've got specifics to go after, we could do that.
Thanks, Paul. Really appreciate that.
I must caution Councillor Masters, no specific cases, please, in our scrutiny work. It's a no. We know.
Yeah,
I'm going to allow you this once because you don't really do it on a regular, but please, members.
Yeah, that's why I didn't mention any specific details.
Yeah, if we have anything that we need to deal with, we take it out of the meeting. Alva, you were going to say something?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, it's worth emphasising that drug dealing, drug use is a crime, and we should encourage residents to call the police, as Paul said. But of course, we also want to encourage residents to report noise and antisocial behaviour to the council in the normal way that they do. The only thing that's changed is that we don't have a rapid response. But however, what we will do, and what we've already started to do and will continue to do, is to look at all those reports where the complaints are persistent and suggest that this is antisocial behaviour. It's not just noise, but now it's causing antisocial behaviour. Then it goes up, if you like, up the ladder, and we'll receive that further investigation, that evidence gathering. And yes, it might not be statutory noise nuisance, because it might not be loud enough to reach that, but because of its persistence, it's antisocial behaviour. And then we'll use other measures to address that. So not having a noise response service only means that we don't have that rapid response as we used to, but we still have a response for noise and antisocial behaviour. So do encourage residents to report it.
Thank you very much, and I really do appreciate your input there. Any members have any questions? Councillor Riaz Mirza.
Thank you, Chair. We are told that we don't have the rapid response team, but what happens? We've got the enforcement officer. If someone rings in and says there's a noise and all this goes on, if they can't respond, then could that be followed up by enforcement if they get consistent complaint from residents that there's a noise? Because I know you don't get much noise in the daytime, but you would get at night, and especially over the weekend. If it can't be responded, then is there any way that enforcement officer could have a word with his, the residents, neighbours, whoever to complain and say, look, we have had a report, now can you sort this out? Is that possible?
Absolutely, Councillor, and that's what happens at the moment. So in the absence of the rapid response, complainants do get a response if it's persistent, and we do look at the addresses, we do look at the complaints, and someone will call them, the complainant. A letter will be sent. An advisory letter is likely to be sent to the alleged perpetrator, and again, depending on the nature of the noise and the level of and the impact that noise is having on the community, officers will go around to gather evidence so that they can, outside of measuring, if they can speak to more than one person to verify that that noise is happening, that's sufficient evidence to start to pursue further along antisocial behavior responses. So yes, absolutely. Noise reported to the council will still be followed up. The only thing we've lost is that for some parts of the week, that instant or rapid response, but everything remains the same.
Thank you very much. Oh, Councillor Mirza, did you have another? You're muted, Councillor Mirza. You're muted. You're muted. Muted. You've just muted yourself again, Councillor Mirza. Please unmute yourself.
Well, I know, can I? Yeah.
Good.
You know, what we encouraging the resident to do is keep reporting the incidents, and then that can be the follow-up. I mean, we might not have a rapid response team, but somebody at some stage will contact them and to assure them that something is being done. I do understand all it comes back to the resources. I mean, we don't have the manpower, we don't have the resources. Police are, occupied with COVID-19 and doing all sorts of things. So, but I think it's very important that residents are assured that there is someone is taking notice and they will do what they can, however they can, with the limited resources they have. I think that's very important, the resident to be assured that something's been done. Okay?
Absolutely. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does any other member have any questions? Okay, my question to Councillor Beckles. It's one of priorities. So we've understood, obviously, in terms of COVID, what our response is and how we're seeking to bridge that gap in regards to these 6 officers and the overtime, etc. We're using, to try and get that done. We've heard in terms of noise what we're not doing. So, there's no rapid response anymore. We will have follow-up, but there is no rapid response there. So I would say, in terms of priorities, what are the key priorities then of the enforcement division? That's my question in a nutshell, Councillor Beckles. Thank you.
Well, the community safety team's main priorities are antisocial behaviour, noise nuisance, fly tipping, and one thing that doesn't come up enough in this meeting, probably prevent. That's another priority for us, and shifting the way we've done things in the past and making it much more of an engaging, much more of an inclusive form of teaching, education, and intervention in this borough. So those are the 4 key areas.
Sorry, I missed one. So it's antisocial behaviour, fly tipping, prevent, and
noise nuisance.
Oh, you would say noise nuisance is a priority?
Yes, it is.
Even though we're diminishing the service?
We're still investigating all cases that come in.
Sure.
We're just not providing a nighttime service. So it is a priority.
Okay. Fantastic. Thank you. Alva, you're shaking your head. I feel like you had something you wanted to say.
Oh no, I was absolutely agreeing with Councillor Beckles. I was shaking my head when you were suggesting that we may be disinvesting. That wasn't a term you used, of course, so let me be clear about that. But the fact that we don't have a nighttime service doesn't mean it's not a priority. It's just a different approach to dealing with that priority. And as Councillor Beckles says, we're spending so much more effort in preventative work and problem-solving work, rather than just an enforcement service. And I keep pointing out to members and colleagues in the council that the council is not a sort of blue light service, and the expectation that that enforcement is one of the key pillars is probably not appropriate, because the council, that's not what the council is set up to do. The council is set up to support residents rather than enforce against residents broadly. So we want to make sure we manage that shift to behavior change in some of our residents who who make life difficult for others, so that eventually, we have a much better informed and supported group of residents, rather than just using a sort of one single approach of enforcement to deal with these problems. A lot of this is around education, a lot of it is around engagement and advising people about how to behave and how to be good neighbors, for example. And these are important pieces of work that a local authority needs to do to support its residents.
Philip, thank you so much. One thing I would just ask you there, and it's in relation, obviously, you were shaking your head when I was speaking there. I used the word diminishment of the service, but even if I did say the word disinvestment, I would urge you to just explain to me how, if as a resident, say a year ago, I could call up at 2 a.m. and potentially get someone round to my noisy neighbour, and now I call up and it's an answering machine, or I've got to speak to someone in the daytime. Please explain to me how that isn't a disinvestment or a diminishment of the service, because you were shaking your head when I was speaking. So I'm just kind of trying to understand how. Just explain to me. Maybe I've got it all wrong. Upside down logic. Thank you.
Right. Well, I need to pay more attention to my head movements to start with, because I can see how it could easily be misinterpreted. However, I really don't think it's a disinvestment in the sense that the funding the funding that perhaps has been lost to the enforcement service is equally invested in much earlier intervention to avoid some of these problems and work with young people, for example. So that's a key part of the work that's happening. So what we are doing is a different approach to dealing with these problems. Enforcement is still there. We still being rerouted slightly, if you like, to do more of that engagement, more of that working with residents to understand the problems, understand the drivers to the problems, work with the perpetrators to understand their problems. Why are they involved in antisocial behavior? Mental health, for example, is often overlooked, but is often a very a key contributor to antisocial behavior. Noise, hoarding, allowing other people to use to misuse your premises. A lot of these people are vulnerable and they are victims. And what we ought to be doing is to understand why they're contributing to antisocial behavior and to support them out of that. And to help other residents to understand some of those drivers. But the idea is that we're absolutely not disinvesting. We are using the money in other ways, and we're rerouting this service to work in a different way to address some of the issues. But where necessary, we will enforce. But it's not the only trick in the book, and it's not the first port of call for us anymore. So we're trying a different approach.
Thank you very much. And I would surmise to say that you are working smarter, not necessarily harder. So thank you very much, Alva. I really do appreciate that. Does anybody else have any other questions? I don't want it to feel like it's just me asking. Does anybody else have any other questions? Councillor Bailey?
Yeah, you can hear me, yes? What about when we have rough sleeper, I mean, who he's got somewhere to live, but he don't want to leave where he's at the moment, where he sleep on the street, and it's not very good, because where children can see him urinating and all that, and the residents complain to us, we've tried very hard to get him moved, and he don't want to move, and it's very frustrating, because he's got somewhere to live and he don't want to stay there. He's on probation as well, and I don't know, we don't know what to do. Honestly, don't know what to do. He don't want to go. So what are we going to do about that?
Hi, Jennifer. There was a lot of work that was put into rough sleeper through the task force that John Gray chaired. And a lot of the work has also, there's a second stream or a third stream. There's so many streams. There's a third stream to that, which looked at enforcement, but enforcement was only the last resort. That if you're engaging people and they don't want to accept help, or they don't want to be diverted to a mental health service, or even back to whichever property or borough that they were working in, that we would continuously support. And that's what we continue to do. So the rough sleeper engagement team, they do go out, they do engage these people, and sometimes it's about making those links with organizations like Praxis and St. Mungo's. So it's council, but it's also third sector, and enforcement side of it would be a last resort, because we don't want to necessarily be punitive to people who are in need of support.
Yeah, he's on. He's been in.
Just quickly, Councillor Bailey, can I just, as I spoke to Councillor Masters earlier, can I just hazard against us sharing any sort of personal information on a case-by-case issue?
Okay.
Obviously, we should really be looking at broad brushstrokes here, not individual cases, just because obviously that person probably hasn't given us the right to speak about their issues on YouTube. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I think if we just leave it there, just because I'm a bit mindful, I don't want us to kind of stray the area.
Go in. Yes. Okay. That's
Thank
fine.
you. Councillor Beckles, did you have anything that you wanted to say again?
No, just other than what I reiterated there in terms of homelessness and rough sleepers. Again, enforcement is the last resort. It's about support. It's about engagement. It's about getting these individuals the help they need, and probably to divert them back to their properties that they have, and also working with the third sector and other partners who work with us on this issue.
Thank you very much, Councillor Beckles. I'm going to go to Councillor Garfield, but I've got a quick one for you, Councillor Beckles. When you were naming the 4 priorities, you said antisocial behaviour, fly tipping, prevent and noise nuisance. When we spoke earlier about Councillor Garfield about parking, obviously you said that was Councillor Asser's issue. I would have thought that fly tipping was firmly under Councillor Asser's brief. Are you saying here tonight in World Exclusive that fly tipping is now under your mandate?
Fly tipping enforcement.
Okay, so that's a really good distinction for us to draw. So fly tipping enforcement, so if we see a fly tip, in terms of enforcing against that and preventing fly tips, that's firmly in your ballpark, is it?
Yes. Well, it sits with both of us in terms of the actual enforcement, going out there, issuing the FPNs, investigating within my portfolio. In terms of the preventative side of things, it's James Asser. But although we do work together on these issues, and yes, and we do take up a lot of the casework and management between us.
Okay. Thank you very much for explaining that, Councillor Garfield.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to know from an enforcement perspective from both Councillor Beckles and Deputy Lieutenant Whiteman and Alva, how ready, from your perspective, for enforcement is Newham for a Tier 3 lockdown?
I'll invite Paul to start that one off, because he's got the enforcement powers. The police has the enforcement powers, not the council. Sorry, Paul.
Yeah, I think we're ready, because we've been there before almost. When you think of back to March, when we had a total lockdown, the schools closed. Now no one's suggesting that is en route, but we have been there before, and we have worked through that, and we used the 4 Ps, even when we had the Nightingale London up and running and ready, and thankfully we didn't need as many of those beds as were there. We've been there and done it, and we have learned lessons about how to brief the staff, how to speak to people, what works, what doesn't, etc. So if we go to Tier 3, we're ready to do that, and we're ready to commit to the resources that we need. I think certainly that I'm pretty sure that the position we'll take will be the 4 E's again, and largely that worked first time round.
Is that to say, Detective Superintendent, that in the event of a Tier 3 lockdown, the Metropolitan Police in Newham would not need additional resources?
No, I think we'd work with what we got. I mean, if we got additional resources, we'd obviously take them, because we do as I said before, we'll work to whatever resource we've got. Now, it's difficult to predict what tier 3 would look like, but we've been in a national lockdown, which you could argue is actually over a tier 3, with schools out and everything else, and we've got through. And yes, we did have resources, we did have people dedicated and different teams. I think we'd end up standing those up, and we'd get through it. And in fact, when you think of the scale of the how many people would have the COVID on the second wave, what we don't know is how many had it on the first, actually. And normally, when you look at these graphs, the second wave isn't as great as the first wave. Whether you knew it or not is another matter.
It's good to know preliminarily that that we are ready, and that no additional resources, obviously they'd be welcomed if they came along, but are required, so that we're not in less in a position where even after Liverpool and Manchester we're somehow caught behind. That's really good to know. Thank you, Detective Superintendent, and thank you, Chair.
Can I just ask Alva and James, from your perspective, is the council ready?
Yeah. Well, I would say right now, probably not. I think we would have to plan for that. We'd have to put forward the right, I don't know, just get all our ducks in the right order, get our services ready for that. And I think that would be in consultation with the government and with London Regional, and we would have to plan together on these things. So at this exact moment in time, I would say no.
Thank you very much for your candor. Alva?
I'll totally agree with Councillor Beckles on that one. There's so many different parts to what the council does. Slightly different from the police in that respect. So, enforcement or that part of it in making sure people comply with the regulations, businesses, for example, is only a small part of it. But as members will know, that the council also has a massive support arm. In total lockdown, we have a lot of vulnerable residents who will need support. So the council will have a number of different services that it will need to get going. So the extent to which it's ready for all of those things, as Councillor Beckles says, we'll have to do it in partnership with a range of people, including national government, but also our regional colleagues. So yes, perhaps we're not ready for all parts of a response. Certainly some parts we can do better than others. If we're talking about enforcement with business regulations, for example, making sure businesses close as they say as they're supposed to, yes, we can do some of those things very easily, I suspect, but there are other parts that we wouldn't be ready for immediately.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else have any questions? Or Councillor Garfield, sorry, do you have another question that you want to ask? No. Okay. Does anybody have any further questions? Okay. On this topic, then, I'm going to ask Councillor Beckles or Alva. Do you have any final remarks that you'd like to give, and then I'll come to Superintendent Paul Whiteman after. Do you have any final remarks you'd like to give on this particular specific issue?
No, Chair. I think it's been quite comprehensive.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. No questions from me.
Okay, thank you. Superintendent Paul Whiteman, do you have any last remarks you want to make on the COVID-19 enforcement?
No, thanks. I think we've covered most of the bases.
Okay, thank you very, very much. We're going to move on then to the next agenda item. Bear with me 2 seconds. There we go, got the right piece of paper. So it's agenda item number 6, and we're looking at the Community Safety Partnership. Now, I'm not going to introduce you guys again because we did that at the start, but James or Alva, do you guys have any opening remarks that you'd like to make on this Community Safety Partnership? Thank you.
I guess I would start. I would say I'm quite enthused by what's happened recently. I think Alva's been brought in and he's completely reshaped and redrawn the lines and the constitution of the Community Safety Partnership, pulled together all the right people in terms of giving it a strategic focus. So it wasn't just having what I would probably say a lower level or lower tier of colleagues and staff who've been brought to it, but now it's much more strategic. It's heads of service, it's directors, and it's the borough commander who chair it. Underneath the community safety partnership sit about 3 or 4 subgroups which are looking into things like domestic violence, prevent, other areas like prostitution. And I think it has a greater strategic focus about what this borough needs and how we can better work together. Not everything that we do, not every response that we have to do alone as a council. It takes probation, it takes health, it takes public health, our own public health team. So I think we are growing in confidence as a partnership, and we are trying to be a lot more focused on the issues that affect our residents.
Thank you very much, Councillor Beckles. Alva, do you have any comments you'd like to make on the Community Safety Partnership? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just to say that the Community Safety Partnership echoes, or the concept of the Community Safety Partnership echoes all the stuff that I've been talking about earlier in the other item around partnership, collaborative working with residents, working with partners, working across the council. So that the responses to the issues that we deal with around crime and disorder is not just from a single service perspective. If we're talking about youth, for example, and youth crime, either as victims or offenders, we need to include colleagues in social services, in housing, in youth services, brighter futures, and so forth. So the approach we're developing now is one of collaborative working, one of real partnership internally and externally. I am pleased with the fact that we've now 3 meetings into the new structure. We're having the meetings quarterly now instead of twice a year as it was before. But 3 meetings in, we've started to move to a much more strategic partnership, as Councillor Becker said. The subgroups are becoming clearer about the tactical approach they need to have. We have a clear constitution that sets out how we should operate and what our remit is. And we're working on some of the areas that we've been struggling with for some time, information sharing being one of them. So we now have a draft information sharing protocol that's with our partners that going through their legal teams to be signed so that we can more easily share information, and our partners can trust us to look after the information they share with us responsibly. So we've made some good progress. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alva. Detective Superintendent Paul Whiteman, do you have anything you want to add as way of an opening remark to this item?
Yeah, I'd echo those comments. I chair our tasking group every month, and we have one of the officers come along and offer up what can the council do to tackle some of these longer term crime trends. How can we share information? How can we get information from council officers going about their daily duties, and how can we make it easy for them to get in touch and recognise what is interesting to us and what we see that is interesting to them, and trying very much to make an efficiency there rather than going the long way around. We're thinking actually that maybe this is something that can be more dealt with a lot better and more effectively by another one of our partners. So we're all up for that, and we do that monthly at that tasking group, and we informally between Alva and myself every fortnight to see what issues are coming up, what can I do to flex some of the stuff that we're doing that covers some of the concerns that have been brought up by councillors and other officers of the council to try and make their jobs a little easier as well.
Thank you very much for those opening remarks. I'm going to move to the members now. Seeing Councillor Garfield, does any other councillor have any questions? Okay, Councillor Garfield.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to draw members' attention, if possible, to page 52, which goes through the structure of the Newham Community Safety Partnership in a flowchart diagram. I'll give you a second to turn to that page. It's page 52 for everyone in the room. My question is of the oversight and governance. So there are 6 principal oversight and governance organisations here, the different boards, and I wanted to know, in a situation, and this does happen frequently in local authorities, in a situation where the boards are in conflict with each other over how to pursue a policy or how to shape enforcement responses to an issue in the borough, what is the deciding factor for who takes precedence in that what appears to be a flat structure in the flowchart?
It's fair to say I haven't come across one of those situations yet. It's also perhaps worth saying that these boards are supported by council officers, and quite often the same council officers attending different boards. So generally the message is consistent and the way of working is consistent. So we don't have that many clashes. I suppose there could be situations, as you described, such as one we're currently debating around domestic violence, for example. What term do we use? Do we use a generic term that many councils use, violence against women and girls, or do we use domestic violence? Because violence against women and girls suggests that men are not victims, and we know some men are victims of domestic violence as well. So we have that debate, but what we do, we have those debates in a kind of very constructive way. We all agree what we're trying to achieve, and yes, different groups might be approaching these things from different perspectives, but ultimately what we're trying to do is to serve our residents better. And if we're trying to improve safety, we agree that. If we're trying to improve health and well-being, we agree that's with the different remits. So I personally haven't come across that. Each of these groups are very clear what their remit is, and the officers that support them, we work to find a way to make sure that we work collaboratively, and we don't contradict each other.
But the remits definitely overlap, if you don't mind me saying so. I've come into contact with situations in public sector where it's obvious that the yacht, being the Youth Justice Board, I would assume, and Health and Wellbeing, Youth Safety, would come into conflict with what they think is the best outcome for a case. And according to this flowchart, neither would take precedence. And what I'm concerned with, I'll paint the picture, is that the yacht, youth safety, and health and wellbeing have a slightly different way they would like to tackle one aspect of crime in the borough. And because neither of those have precedence in the structure, the decision falls to the executive. And that, for me, takes away the independent nature of the community safety partnership and takes away the multidisciplinary function of the partnership. That's one risk that I think in having a structure as flat as this poses.
Can I just ask Councillor Beckles, the picture that Councillor Garfield has painted, is that correct? I mean, ultimately, what would happen now? I know Alva said he hasn't come across it, but just not coming across something doesn't mean it can't happen or won't happen. So the question I would ask you is, if it was to happen tomorrow morning, what would be the outcome based on what Councillor Garfield said? Thank you, Councillor Beckles.
Well, I'm not sure what the outcome would be, but what I would say is that three of those boards are chaired by or co-chaired by the same person. So I would hope that there would be some alignment in terms of view, direction, and also commitments. But I would imagine that any conflict would be escalated to the local strategic partnership board, although it's not in full operation. But because a number of people do sit across the number of boards, I would hope that the views are shared and the direction in which all the boards can work towards would be aligned and would be the same goal.
Thank you. So just quickly, in terms of the local strategic partnership board, who is on that? What's the membership of that?
I don't know the makeup of that, I'm afraid.
Because I would assume they'd be the ultimate arbiter in if there was a conflict between the boards. And also, you said three of the boards are chaired by the same person. Who chairs three of these boards? Because I think that's quite important, isn't it? Who chairs three of these?
Okay, the Health and Wellbeing Board is co-chaired by the Mayor. The Youth Safety Board is co-chaired by the Mayor. The Children's Partnership Board is chaired by Sarah Ruers, I believe. The Safeguarding Adults Board by the lead member for Public Health, and Health and Wellbeing Board, yeah, we've covered that, and CSP is chaired by the Borough Commander.
Okay, there's only one missing, Youth Justice Partnership Board. So it's
Yeah. Just to say, I don't think the Youth Justice Partnership Board is fully functioning at the moment. It's illustrated there as one of the strategic partnership boards, but I don't think it's fully functioning at the moment. But it's there in some form, but it hasn't met recently, as far as I'm aware. I probably need to check the status of that board.
Okay, so just so I can drill down into this, so the Youth Justice Partnership Board is not fully functioning. The Safeguarding Adults Board would be chaired by the lead member for health, I believe. Is that Councillor Ali?
Yes,
yeah?
Safeguarding Adults Board, yeah. I imagine
how-
would be co-chaired or chaired by Councillor Ali.
When you say co-chaired with who? With the mayor again?
I don't know if it's co-chaired with the mayor. The Health and Wellbeing Board is co-chaired with the mayor.
Okay, one thing I would ask you, obviously this is in your papers, I know it's come to you, but it's not just you guys. Who would have a working knowledge as to who, like the overall makeup of this document that we're looking at? Who would know that? Alva, maybe from the officer side?
Yes, I wrote the document, so I have the working of the document.
Okay.
The boards that are represented there, the only one that I'm intimately involved in is the Community Safety Partnership Board. I am involved to some extent in the Youth Safety Board and so forth, but I'm not involved in all of the boards directly. So the boards do exist. How fully functioning they are, I couldn't tell you on all of them.
Okay. The only thing I would say, just as well as a follow-up, and I'll come to Councillor Masters after, is obviously you said you're 3 meetings in and you meet quarterly, right? So this document's been around for quite a while. This plan's been around for quite a while. Do you have any idea as to why these other ones are not functioning yet, considering you've been going for quite some time?
I wouldn't want to say they're not functioning, Chair. I just don't know how well they're functioning.
I'm sorry. Look, I normally would try and let you get away with that, but I'm a bit confused, Alva. Please help me here. You're not sure how well they're functioning. They are functioning. They're not functioning. It seems all a bit murky, and I'm just very confused. It's kind of a bit of a straight thing. I don't get it.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be misleading at all.
I think that's the point.
All I'm saying is I don't attend those boards, so I don't know how they function. I know, for example, the Children's Safeguarding Board, Children's Partnership Board, which is old school language, Children's Safeguarding Board. I communicate often with the chair. I share a lot of information with her because her work, particularly in relation to domestic violence and youth safety, cut across the Community Safety Partnership. So even this week, we've shared a lot of information about serious case reviews that they're doing into some domestic violence cases, for example. The Youth Safety Board, I am involved in a lot because I sit on some of the subgroups that support that board. I don't attend the Safeguarding Adults Board or the Health and Wellbeing Board. And I don't know how fully functioning the Youth Justice Partnership Board is because I haven't heard a lot about it since I've been in Newham. So what I'm trying to say is I wouldn't like to say they're not functioning. I just can't say how well they're functioning.
I appreciate your very walking the line answer. I'm going to come to Councillor Masters. Roger, can I ask something by way of a follow-up, please? That we find out how well these boards are functioning, if they're functioning, when they last functioned, if they've ever functioned. I think we just need to find out about the function. Councillor Masters.
It's kind of nuancing what Daniel's just said, actually, and as a point of action, just asking that we get the membership of those particular boards, because I remember sitting on Safeguarding Adults and it has an independent chair, as I recall, although the lead member for Health and Adult Social Care does attend.
Okay, Roger, did you get that? I think it's kind of what I said, sort of thing, but just adding after
so
the membership.
The chairs, the meetings, how long they've been functioning, and also the membership. Thank you.
The membership, that's what Councillor Masters asked me for. Councillor Masters, do you have anything else you'd like to add? Any by way of supplementary?
No, not as a supplementary.
Okay, Alva?
Thank you, Chair. The beauty of technology has allowed me to ask a question while we're speaking. And yes, the Youth Justice Partnership Board does work. It's chaired by It's chaired by the Director of Public Health, Jason Strelis, and it meets quarterly. So it does. So that's the Youth Justice Partnership Board.
That's really interesting. So just to clarify, so the Director of Public Health chairs the Youth Justice Partnership Board.
Yes.
Okay.
And there's also a YOS Improvement Board that supports this. That's not illustrated here, and that supports again the young people. So around young people, there's a number of groups supporting that work to make sure the YOS works effectively. And the Youth Justice Partnership, which includes the courts and the criminal justice part of things, and of course the Youth Safety Board that you may be familiar with, chaired by the mayor. That's a more recent board.
Okay, it just seems to me, from my layman's side of the table, that the Director of Public Health wouldn't necessarily be the normal fit, I would assume, for this Justice Partnership Board. But is that normal practice? Is that normally what happens?
That is, yes, that is normal. I think, yes, the chairing doesn't necessarily require that direct expertise, subject knowledge. I think the chairing is more around the coordinating of the relevant agencies and information, but also the crossover between these issues, are varied and many. So I think it's important that senior officers get to understand the part of how the council works. So personally, I think it's fine.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Any more questions? Nobody? Okay. Councillor Beckles, do you have any final remarks you'd like to make on this item?
No, Chair. Just if there's any questions, do let me know.
No problem. One thing I would say is maybe if we could just get an update from you when you hit that 1 year milestone. Obviously, I know we're in the midst of COVID, but just once you hit your 4th meeting, it'd be nice to know what you've learned along the way, what you think could be done better, lessons learned, etc. I just think it would be good by way of doing that 1 year, which is not that far away now, for us to see, how far you've come and what we've done to make it better. Alva, do you have any closing remarks?
No, thank you, Chair. Sorry, struggled to find my mute button there for a minute. No, thank you.
No worries, no worries. And last but not least, Detective Superintendent Paul Whiteman, do you have any closing remarks you'd like to make on this item?
No, thanks.
No worries. Thank you very much. Can I just say thank you very much to all of our witnesses. We really do appreciate you taking time out of your very busy schedules to come and join us this evening. Please do feel free to stick around for the rest of the meeting. However, we will not be offended should you decide that it's time for you to log off. So thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Okay, I'm going to move on to item number 7, which is our work programme. Has all the members had a chance to have a look at the work programme? Has anybody got anything that they would like to add to the work programme at this time? No? Everybody's happy and satisfied with what we've got on there? Is that a yes? Can I just get a thumbs up from everybody if you're happy? Thank you, Councillor Guana. Councillor Garfield? Thank you, Councillor Masters. Thank you, Councillor Garfield. Councillor Bailey, thank you very much. Okay, so I think in terms of our work programme, we will leave it then as it is if nobody's got anything they want to add, and we've got that all set out. Roger? Roger, you're muted.
Hello?
Yeah. Is there anything else that you think that should be added on there in terms of things that have come up or anything that's been sent to you?
No. Did you say you wanted an enforcement specific item for the next meeting to Alva?
In terms of Alva's report that he would have brought to our meeting, hence, I think it was back in March, I think it was.
Yeah,
there was a report that he took time to put together, and I just think we should do him right by taking the time to look at what it was he put together. Admittedly, things have moved on a tiny bit because of the COVID-19 pandemic. However, he still did the work, and I think we should have a look at it, just for a short time, but at least have a look at it and give it the due attention that is due. Yeah. Okay.
So in terms of, I was just going to say, how do you want to pursue the modern slavery item? How do you want to pursue that going forward?
Sure. I mean, in terms of modern slavery, I would ask, I mean, who is the lead member for that? Would that be Councillor Beckles? Roger?
I'm trying to think.
If any member knows, please do.
I
chip
would
in
think so, but I'll double check. But I would think that would be his area.
there. Councillor
I'll double
Masters?
check tomorrow.
I think it might fall between a couple of portfolios. So I think that the lead for adults and health has something to do with it as well, because I know it used to come to adult safeguarding.
Sure. Okay, Roger. Well, if you could report back to us on that, that may be something that then we can then have a look at. I think prior to COVID-19, we had, I think, one session where we heard a little bit about procurement in regards to modern slavery, but I don't think there was much more than that. So I think we'll obviously wait for you to come back to us, but that's as much as we've got now. Okay, so we're all agreed on the work programme. Is that agreed? Agreed. Fantastic. Thank you. Item 8, date of our next meeting. Our next meeting is going to be on the 17th of November 2020. Okay, 17th of November 2020. I just want to thank everybody for attending. And this now concludes the business of this committee. And I now declare the meeting closed at 8:42. Thank you very much.